My name is Renee Michot. I'm here to introduce my research partner, Jim Rigsby. We are cemetery historians doing a project titled Remembrance. Our goal is to visit every known grave within the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, pay our respects, and publish what we find for the general public who might be unable to visit these places in person. We have business cards available for our website, and we'll take questions at the end of today's session. Today you will meet Hiram Husky, an old-timer from the late 1800s, to learn about the death and burial practices of the Smoky Mountain settlers. Mr. Husky?
I am Hiram Husky, and I'm honored you all stopped by today. I lived in those mountains a long, long time ago, a place called Socash, upstream from what you know as Pittman Center. In my day, Pittman Center was called Emmert's Cove, but Socash has always been Socash. I was married to Matilda Louisa Green Husky. I called her Maddie. And we had us 2 young daughters. The story I'm going to tell you today happened in August of 1918 and 92. It was terrible hot. Terrible hot. Maddie was pregnant with our 3rd baby, and she was pretty far along. Me and Maddie had us a corn patch up on the ridge where the land was kind of flat-like. And I told Maddie I was going to go up there and cut some of the brush back. If I didn't, it was going to take over some of our corn. And we had them 2 kids to feed, and another one on the way. Maddie said she was going to feed the girls, do up the pans. Then she'd go out to the garden and hoe the weeds. And I said, no, it's too hot for you to be working out in the sun, carrying that baby like that. There's plenty of work to be done in the shade. I'd cut the brush back up in the corn patch, and then I'd come down and I'd do the garden. Well, Maddie was a strong-minded woman. You had to be strong-minded to survive on the side of a mountain. She told me not to worry about her and that she'd be fine. It wouldn't take her long to weed the garden, and then she'd move on into the shade. So I went up to the corn patch. I started at one side and I cut the brush way back into the trees so I wouldn't have to go back up and do it again. It was so hot I felt all red in the face and I could feel my heart pounding. It was almost sick to your stomach hot. And I worried about Maddie working out in the sun with that baby in her. There was always so much work to do, you could never see the end of it, not with both of us working. I was tired all the time. Maddie was tired all the time. Well, up in the afternoon, one of the neighbor men come running up and he said, "Hiram, there you are. We've been looking all over for you." He told me that Maddie had started laboring that baby. My elder girl didn't know where I was, so she had the smarts to run to the neighbor's house because she knew something real bad was happening. Neighbor man said that his wife was already with Maddie, and they'd called for the midwife, and she was on her way, and they took my 2 girls over to their grandpa, Old Man Green. Well, I dropped everything I was doing and ran down to the cabin. Me and Maddie had us a 2-room cabin. There was a big room where we did our living, and that's where the girls slept. And then to the side there was a small room that I had built myself, and that's where me and Maddie slept, and we stored things in there. Well, when I got down to the cabin, Maddie was in the back room, and she kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." That baby weren't due yet. We weren't looking for that baby for another month. I don't know. If I'd have known, I'd have never let Maddie work out in the sun that way. But we had them 2 girls to take care of. The midwife tried to stop Maddie's labor, gave her some kind of herb tea, supposed to quiet her, but Maddie couldn't keep it down. So that baby came early. It was no bigger than a kitten. I could hold it in one hand. It was a boy child, and I was so proud. I finally had me a son. But things weren't right by that baby. His head was too big, and his skin was all bluish. And he made this strange, awful breathing sound. You could barely hear it, but I can still hear it to this day. So I picked up that baby and I rocked him. Maddie was too sick to hold the baby. That baby only lived a half hour. I rocked him and then I heard that awful breathing stop. But at least he didn't die by himself. Well, the word had spread through Socash that Maddie was in early labor, so a couple of the neighbor ladies had already come over to try to help. They couldn't stop Maddie bleeding. Midwife kept saying, if we just had some ice, if we only had some ice. Well, it was August and nobody had no ice. So they sent out for the doctor. How are you supposed to pay for a doctor? I didn't have no cash money. Nobody had no cash money. You made for yourself. And you did for yourself. You did for each other. Oh, you could make some cash money if you did moonshine, but I didn't. Oh, Maddie would have never held still from me breaking the law. And it's not that she thought that moonshine was a sin. She did not. But she said, if I went to jail, who'd fare for her and the girls? And I allowed she was right. You could sell a few eggs. And if you had apple trees, you could sell some apples. But how are you going to pay for a doctor? Give him a dozen eggs? I guess it don't matter. By the time the doctor got there, Maddie was dead. The midwife sat down and cried with her face in her hands. One of the neighbor ladies started massaging Maddie's face. You'd massage the face of a dead person so the muscles would set relaxed and it would close the eyes. Maddie's eyes was already closed. The doctor took 2 silver coins out of his bag and he put them on Maddie's eyes to keep the lids closed till the muscles set. That sure looked strange. I hear tell if you use copper coins, it colors the skin. So they had to be silver coins. Pretty soon I heard the church bell clanging down at Evans Chapel. You never heard the church bell that time of day. But when somebody died, they'd ring that bell real loud to get everybody's attention. And then that bell would go quiet. And then they would ring that bell slow, one time for every year that the person was old. And most people could tell who died by the number of times that the bell tolled. Maddie was 24, so the bell rang 24 times. So the neighbor folks started coming in from all over Socash to help us out. They stopped everything they was doing to help me and my family out. The ladies had me go out of the room so they could wash up the body and prepare Maddie. So I changed into clean clothes and I shaved because I knowed people was going to be turning out. Makes my heart glad, the people that dropped everything to help us out. Well, there was a carpenter man in Socash, made all the coffins when somebody died. He kept wood in his barn that he had planed with his own hand so he could be ready when somebody died. He came in and the ladies let him go in the back, and I knowed he was measuring how tall she was. That good man stopped everything that he was doing so that my Maddie could have her a proper coffin. 3 or 4 of the stronger men came in. They said they was going to go up to Doc Green's cemetery and dig a grave for Maddie. They said they wanted to put her next to her mama, if that was okay by me. Well, I couldn't think straight, so I told them just do whatever they see fit. I hear tell that when they was digging, they hit a big rock, and they had to bust it out with a hammer and chisel so we could put Maddie where we wanted. That happened a lot when you dug graves because the land is so rocky. Sometimes you'd hit a boulder that was too big to bust out with a hammer and chisel, and you would just have to shovel the dirt back in the hole and start over someplace else. Well, when they got Maddie ready, they brought her out. They carried her on a quilt like you was carrying a hammock. And some of the men folk had set up sawhorses and put planks across so we could lay Maddie out, and then they took that quilt and they draped it down the front so it would look real nice. They had her in her Sunday dress. Maddie's sister had arranged her hair on top of her head just like she had for our wedding. She was about as pretty as I'd ever seen her look. Now, mind you, she was beautiful at our wedding, but I think she was even more beautiful today because we'd been married, and I knowed her heart. And she was the mother to my 2 daughters and my son. Then they took that baby and they put it in her arms like she was just holding it. Saddest I've ever felt my whole life, before or since. They took that baby and they wrapped him up in a rabbit pelt, all nice. And I thought, it's too hot to wrap a baby in rabbit skin like that. Crazy things go through your head. I sang to that baby. Maddie weren't never going to get a chance to sing, and I thought I should sing to that baby. There's an old lullaby Maddie used to sing to the girls. Bye, baby bunting, Daddy's gone a-hunting to catch a little rabbit skin to wrap my baby bunting in. And I couldn't get the tune out of my head, like it was worrying on me. Bye, baby bunting. Bye, baby. I never did name that baby. Oh, I wouldn't have done that without talking it over with Maddie first. A lot of babies died back then, and a lot of babies didn't have names. Pretty soon one of the menfolk came in and he said that Old Man Green was coming up the way in a wagon bringing my girls home. So I went out on the stoop to wait on them. I knowed I had to tell them that their mama had died. And I knowed I needed to tell them before they came in and see her laid out like that. I never dreaded any moment of my life like I dreaded having to tell the girls that Maddie was dead. Well, Old Man Green pulls up in the wagon, the girls jump off and they run up to me and hug me and they're crying. And Old Man Green said they already knowed. Now, Old Man Green thought it was my place to tell the girls about their mama, but he said they kept seeing people run in and out in a hurry and they was whispering so they couldn't hear. And finally, my older girl just flat out asked, "Grandpa, is Mama dead?" And he said he didn't have the heart to lie to that young lady. So my father-in-law spared me that terrible work. My younger girl come up and whispered in my ear, "Papa, are you going to die too?" How do you answer something like that? So I said, "No, sweetie, I'm not going to die. I'll try not to die." Well, come supper time, here come all the church ladies bringing in food. They brought all kinds of food. They'd fried up chicken and they'd boiled potatoes. They'd even made pies. You see, they weren't just going to feed me and the girls. They was going to feed everybody that had turned out to help us. One lady brought a ham, a whole ham that was meant for her own table. She said last winter she was down sick and Maddie had come over in the snow to feed her and her kids. She said she felt like she owed Maddie a favor and this was her last chance to settle. I said, "Oh, Maddie weren't one to keep score. It was just her nature to help people. But I'm powerful touched that you thought to do that." I was too upset to eat. But one of the church ladies said, "Hiram, you have got to eat. You're going to be setting up all night for the wake, and you can't be going weak. You have got to eat." So what she did, she took a little piece of chicken and she put it on a saucer with some potatoes, and she set that down in front of me. And I ate it. Then later on, she put a little bit more food on a saucer and she put that in front of me, and I ate it. She did that a few times, and that's how she got me to eat. I bless her to this day for doing that for me. One of the neighbor ladies, Miss Clark, came in. She had a plate of biscuits. She was a widow woman with a boy to raise by herself. She could barely put food on her own table. The flour for them biscuits was all she could spare, but she wanted to help. So the lady that had been feeding me put fresh butter on one of those biscuits and handed it to me, and I knowed why. I said, "Miss Clark, you surely do make a fine biscuit." She put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Hiram, I know what it is to lose your mate. We are like stained glass windows made out of broken pieces. When it came time for Miss Clark to go, church ladies put food on the plate, some chicken and apple pie, enough for her and her boy to have a couple of meals, and then they all hugged each other. One of the neighbor boys, named Bobby, came over. He was all dressed up like Sunday. He'd even put on a necktie. That meant a lot to me that he got all dressed up to come see my Maddie. He was about 16 years old, and we always thought he was kind of sweet on Maddie, even though he knowed she was married. And even if she weren't, he was too young for her. But Maddie always treated him nice. She said nobody else treats him nice. Maddie treated everybody nice. So Bobby comes up to me and he says, "Mr. Husky." Now Bobby always called me Hiram, but today he said, "Mr. Husky, I would like to carve Matilda's headstone, if you'll have me. I know my letters." Why, it was Maddie taught the boy how to read. His papa wouldn't let him go to school. Papa said, "Boys don't need books, boys need brawn." Well, Maddie knew better than that. So some evenings Bobby'd come over. Maddie taught him his letters, taught him how to sound out the words. So I said, "Mr. Bobby, I would be honored for you to carve Maddie's headstone. And I'm sure Maddie'd be proud, honored too." Well, most headstones didn't have no writing on them. If it had writing, it was usually a stonemason or somebody like Bobby, friend of the family, wanted to do it. But most stones didn't have writing on them. You didn't have to. Most people couldn't read, even if you did carve the stone. But we kept stuff like that in our heads. People passed that down from one generation to another. Anybody in Socash could walk through a cemetery and tell you who was what, was where. They could say, "That stone there, that's Maddie's ma, Gloria Green. She went up to the hayfield to help the men folk because there was a storm coming in. She got throwed from a hay wagon, broke her neck. And up above, Gloria's stone, that's Gloria's sister, Louisa. She died of the typhoid when she was 5 years old. That's how Maddie got her middle name, Matilda Louisa Green." So we had all that in our heads, and the old-timers passed it down. So much of that's been lost, because nobody remembers anymore. When your grandchildren take their grandchildren up to the cemetery, who's going to remember anymore? Who's going to remember who Maddie was? Well, I told Bobby what day Maddie was born so we could put it on the stone. But he went over to Old Man Green's to look in the front of the family Bible. Family Bible's where you wrote down important days, like when you was born and when you got married or when somebody died. You see, some of the headstones had the day wrong, or they have the name spelled wrong. And Bobby wanted to be double sure, so he looked in the Bible. And that was right of him to do that. And I respected that boy for that. Old Man Green had him an inkwell. He wanted his kids and his grandkids to know how to write. Well, Bobby knew how to write, so he took a nib and he wrote in the front of the Bible the day that Maddie and that baby died. Then they said he sat down in the corner and cried like a baby. It took Bobby a goodly while to make that headstone, but I weren't in no hurry. He looked all over Socash till he found just the rock that he wanted. He needed something flat, and it needed to be long enough that you could plant it in the ground so it's not going to shift, and something soft enough that you could carve in. And then he practiced on the same kind of stone until he got a feel for it. He took a string and he stretched it across that stone and made lines with charcoal so he could keep the letters all straight. I thought it looked real nice. It weren't fancy, but I thought it looked real nice. People kept coming over up in the evening. Some of them came over to help. Some people came over to pay their respects. Somebody brought the eggs in from the hen house. Somebody else milked my cow. Well, after I finally put the girls to bed, some of us sat up for the wake. You called it a wake because you was going to be awake all night sitting with the body. But there was more to it than that, why you called it a wake. You see, sometimes a body'd wake up. Sometimes a body weren't really dead. Sometimes they was just sleeping. And they'd wake up, and you had to be there if they woke up. We know Maddie weren't going to wake up. She was pretty bad. But we sat up with her anyway, because we weren't never going to see her again. It was hot in August, even in the middle of the night. So I knew we needed to get her in the ground right away. Now, in cooler weather, you could keep a body for 2 or 3 days while kinfolk came on in. But not in August. I didn't want to do it that quick. I didn't want to tell her goodbye yet, but I know we couldn't. We couldn't keep her in the heat. About 6 of us sat up for the wake, and we told stories on Maddie. I told how Maddie had taught me how to read. I always wanted Maddie to be a school teacher, but there weren't no time, not with a farm and kids to keep up with. My best friend sat up with us, and he used to call Maddie that mean old woman. Well, Maddie weren't mean. Maddie weren't old. But the nickname stuck, and I think she kind of got a kick out of it. I picked up that dead baby, and I held him for a long time. I weren't ever going to get to hold him again. And he was my only boy child. I wanted to raise that boy. I wanted to love him. I wanted to teach him things. That was the longest night of my life. But still, it went by too quick. I weren't ready to let Maddie go yet. I needed time to think. I needed time to ask, Maddie, what am I going to do? Come sunup, the coffin man came over with a coffin in his wagon, and he left the wagon parked out front to take Maddie down to Evans Chapel. They picked Maddie up by the 4 corners of that quilt, and they set her and the baby down in the coffin. Then they stuffed that quilt all around her so that the body wouldn't shift when they moved it. Then we all went down to Evans Chapel for her service. I hated it. I hated every minute of it. We sang songs about joy and the sweet by and by. Well, I weren't feeling no joy. And then the preacher preached. He used all this flowery talk like dearly departed and the great beyond. Maddie was dead. The preacher acted like he was afraid to just come out and say so. And then he prayed on and on. I don't remember a word he said. It was hot in that church. Well, they had the windows open, but there weren't no breeze. I was tired of sitting on that bench. I just wanted to go outside and run. I wanted to run and never quit running. When it was done and they put the lid on Maddie's coffin, I couldn't watch them nail the coffin shut, so I took the girls and went outside. We went on up to the cemetery. Dot Green Cemetery is up on a ridge top. You had to keep your bottom land for crops and buildings, so cemeteries was always up on a ridge top. There was wagon roads that took you up to Fraser Cemetery and Lindsaytown Cemetery. But Dot Green Cemetery didn't have much of a road to it, so they took the wagon up as far as they could, then they had to carry the coffin the rest of the way. Some cemeteries that didn't have good roads, the pallbearers would have to trade off and spell each other to get the coffin all the way up to the cemetery. So I went on up to the grave. That was the custom, that everybody would gather around the grave, and they'd already be there when they brought the coffin up. And that was fine by me, because I didn't want to hear Maddie's body bumping around in the coffin when they wrestled it up the hill. When I got up to the cemetery, there was already an old man there by her grave. And he said, "Hiram, I am sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry I didn't come out to pay my respects. But I wanted to remember Maddie alive. You see, Maddie taught me how to read when she was but a girl. I was past 50 years old, and I had done give up on ever reading. So I said to him that he said he was going to come by the grave and stand watch. I said, that is paying your respects. And it got me thinking, maybe Maddie was a school teacher after all. Well, after we buried Maddie, the church ladies said they was going to feed everybody down at Old Man Green's. And I said that I'd be along, that I needed to be by myself for a spell. So I went back up to the corn patch where I'd been cleaning brush. Somebody had done already finished the job for me, and they had put my tools away. I sat down on a log and cried. How am I going to take care of my two girls? They ain't old enough to work. I can't take them out to the fields with me. I cannot wash and sew and cook if I'm working crops. I cannot do the work of two people. And I weren't looking to get married again with Maddie fresh in the ground. How am I going to look after my girls? Maddie's sister took them 2 girls. She already had a son, but she raised my girls like they was her own. Oh, I still provided for them. I saw them every day, and they spent a goodly part of their time at my cabin. But it was Maddie's sister what raised them, taught them how to be women. People need each other. You need a community. Whether it's putting up crops or raising a barn or raising young'uns or burying somebody what died, people need a community. And that's what we had at Socash. My real name is Jim Rigsby, and I am one half of a cemetery research project called Remembrance. Maddie and Hiram Husky are fictitious characters, but everything that you've heard today is true. There really is a valley called Socash up above Pittman Center. There really was an Evans Chapel. There's nothing left of it anymore. There really is still a Dock Green Cemetery up on the ridge top. You have to do some work to get there. But more than that, all of the customs and practices that you just heard about are the actual heritage passed down from the Smoky Mountain settlers. I was going to bring to the stage, and she's already at the stage, my research partner, Renee Michot. She's one of the most intelligent women you'll ever meet. And we do have business cards down here if you're interested in the Remembrance Project. It is our intention to visit every known grave within the national park and then publish it, and you can go to the website for that. If you're interested more about the cemeteries in the national park and our project, we have a presentation tomorrow at 11:30 here at Wilderness Wildlife Week. And with that, we'll take questions if anybody has questions. And there was silence among the congregation. We appreciate you coming by. If you do have questions or anything, stop by up front to talk to us. We'll be happy to talk to you. Be happy to give you one of our business cards down here. Thank you very much.